Hi everyone, welcome back to Be Like Christ. Today our study is in Isaiah chapter 9, and I know that many of you already know this, but I just wanted to say for anyone maybe unfamiliar that there is so much more study that can happen around chapters like this one and others in Isaiah. This really is just kind of a primer, a summary, quick overview of what's going on here, but there's so much that you can dig into further, like historical references to events that occurred and the history that's parallel to this in the books of like the Chronicles and the Kings. There's also so much more you can do in the prophetic study. There's some really important prophecies in this chapter, and you can look into those and look where they're cited and quoted in the New Testament and see how they come to fulfillment. And there's just so much more. And so if you have more time, I definitely encourage you to look into this chapter deeper than what we can today. But this really is just kind of an introductory video. And so again, I know most of you know that, but if you're maybe new to studying the Bible, don't think that what I'm presenting here is all that there is. Okay, let's get into chapter 9. As always, at the top of our outline, we have our short summary of the chapter, but we will not look at that today because we're going to go over the more detailed one. As far as our timeline, when these events happen, this is going to be pretty much the same as in the last couple chapters. Isaiah 9 took place during the reign of King Ahaz. He's mentioned in chapter 7, verse 1. As far as our key characters, of course, Isaiah is God's prophet. He is the one who the book is named after. He was a prophet mainly to the people of Judah in the southern kingdom, but in this chapter, he's going to be primarily speaking to the citizens of Israel, who were up there in the northern kingdom. They had been rebels against God for many decades, and so God has some things to say to them. For our definitions today, first we have Jacob. Now this is somebody's name. Jacob was the father of the 12 tribes of Israel, but it's not used to refer to him specifically here. His name is very often used to refer to the people of Israel as a whole, and that's the way it's used in verse 8. We also have Ephraim. This is similar. Ephraim was the largest tribe in the northern kingdom, originally named after Jacob's son, Ephraim. But the name Ephraim here is used to refer to the whole nation. And then we have Zebulun, Naphtali, and Manasseh. If you know your biblical history, you already know this, but if you are unfamiliar with some of those earlier books of the Bible, these were names of the tribes, certain tribes of Israel, and their land was all located within this northern kingdom of Israel. As we get into our text today, the first 7 verses have some really important prophecies in them, and you may be kind of familiar with them because some of this language gets put out there in the culture, usually around Christmas time. And so some of these maybe will sound a little bit familiar. So the first 7 verses, "Unto us a child is born." In Isaiah 8, God spoke condemnation over the northern kingdom of Israel, but now he opens up with a little bit of future optimism. Though Israel would be punished, in the immediate moment, the land would be blessed in the, quote, latter time. Light would shine in areas that were once consumed by darkness, and the light of God would shine on the land and bring it joy. Now, we don't have this for all prophecies in the Bible, but there's actually a New Testament writer that tells us exactly how this prophecy was fulfilled. Matthew, the author of the book of Matthew, tells us this prophecy was fulfilled when Jesus went to live and teach in the land that was formerly Israel. And I have a verse reference there that you can check out in Matthew 4. That day would be like Gideon's victory over Midian. That's a historical narrative recorded in Judges chapter 7. So the day of God's joy would be like that day when Israel threw off the burden of their oppressors. Jesus would throw off the burden of sin and defeat our oppressor, Israel's oppressor, Satan. Isaiah prophesied that this great day of joy would come with, it would be led up to by the birth of a child. Isaiah, speaking prophetically, says this. This is one of the most famous prophecies of Jesus in the whole Bible. "For to us a child is born, and to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end, on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and righteousness from this time forth and forevermore." So this coming child would be a king. He would have all of these titles that we just mentioned, and he would sit on David's throne, and his reign would bring peace and righteousness, and it would have no end. When Isaiah prophesied this, he didn't have a perfectly clear picture of the way that Jesus was going to come onto the earth, the way the Messiah was going to be, and how he would forgive people of sins and throw off the burden of Satan. Right? He just has this piece of information that he prophesies, and we have the privilege of looking back and saying, okay, we know how this was fulfilled when we read the Gospels in the New Testament. Okay, so now let's take a look at section number 2, Judgment on Present-Day Israel, verses 8 through 21. While God promised this hope to the future land of Israel, the wickedness of the present day had to be dealt with. And in the second half of the chapter, God speaks through Isaiah of the judgment that he's going to bring on the nation of Israel. The proud people of Israel thought that they could rebuild their nation without returning to God, without repenting. But God was going to tear it down even further. He was going to use nations like the Syrians and the Philistines to, quote, devour Israel. Israel was full of false guides who had led the people wrong and away from God, and people who had allowed themselves to be misled by them. God had corrected Israel many times, but they refused to repent. So now God's judgment awaited them. And Isaiah spoke of God's judgment as a wildfire fueled by wickedness. It burned on wickedness. There was so much evil that the fire had no lack of fuel, and it would just burn and burn until it scorched everything and everyone. So that wraps up chapter 9, at least our brief overview. Let's think about this wildfire idea for our application today. I was thinking, this is still true of in the modern day. Wickedness, sin, godlessness, and immorality are like an invisible wildfire that just tears through nations. And you can see this happening in a lot of countries around the world, or the beginnings of it happening in some countries. No institution is safe when it's overtaken by immorality. No government is secure when its politicians embrace sin. No society can stand on principle when it discards its respect for God or denies his existence. No person, adult or child, is safe when the lines between right and wrong are blurred. That's going to be it for our study today. I will say, if you don't quite understand the ideas of Israel as the northern kingdom and Judah as the southern kingdom and exactly what's going on here, where this fits into the Bible story, I recently did a video summarizing the entire Bible story in one video. Again, it's a high-level overview, but it might be helpful to you to get a better grasp on where Isaiah fits in the biblical timeline and just a better concept of some of the places and people and events that he's talking about. So check that out. I will try to put a link to that down in the description.